A black boy carried deep pain. Yet his courage to fight back brought unexpected justice. Why don't you fight back? Huh? Say something. The voice slammed into the hallway like a hammer, hard enough to make even the lockers tremble. 14-year-old Callel Turner stood alone, his back pressed against the cold metal, his books scattered across the floor like broken pieces of his day. He didn't look up. He didn't argue. He just breathed slow, quiet, tired. The kind of tired that didn't come from running, but from years of holding pain in his chest like a secret he could never put down. The tall white boy towering over him smirked, kicking Callel's notebook toward the trash can. Come on, say something, little hero. Aren't you supposed to be strong? Aren't all of you supposed to be tough? His friends laughed, loud and sharp, like they enjoyed seeing someone smaller fall apart inch by inch. Callel lifted his head just enough to meet their eyes. Not with anger, not with fear, with something deeper, the quiet ache of someone who has learned to survive in silence. The hallway noise faded, replaced by the soft memory of his mother's voice. Baby, when they hurt you, don't let your heart turn into them. So he stayed quiet, but the silence only made the bullies angrier. One shoved him harder, one blocked his exit, one whispered, "Bet your dad ran." Huh? Bet that's why you're weak. And that was the moment something cracked, not loudly, not violently, but like a thin line splitting through a glass window. Because Callel's father hadn't run. He had died saving someone, and nobody in that hallway knew that except him. A teacher walked by, glanced at the scene, then kept walking. A security guard turned the corner, saw nothing, said nothing. The world moved on, and Callel stood there with the unmistakable truth settling in his bones. No one was coming to help him, but something else happened, to something the bullies didn't see. Callel's fingers curled slowly into fists, his shoulders straightened, his breath steadied. He wasn't angry, just done. Done being quiet, done being invisible, done pretending the pain didn't live inside him like a second heartbeat. He picked up his crushed notebook, brushed off the dust, and whispered not to them, but to himself, "Tomorrow, I won't stand here like this. Tomorrow, something changes." They laughed at him as he walked away. They didn't know they had just awakened something they would regret, and tomorrow was much closer than anyone expected. The next morning, Callel walked into school with the same quiet steps, the same worn-out backpack, the same tired eyes, but something inside him wasn't the same at all, and the change was so subtle, so silent, that no one noticed it until it was far too late. He moved down the halls like a shadow carried by purpose, not fear, gripping the strap of his backpack tightly as if it were the only thing keeping him from falling apart. His mother's voice echoed in his mind again, soft, warm, the only sound that had ever made him feel safe, telling him that courage wasn't loud. Courage was a quiet fire that burned inside you even when your body shook. And today, that fire felt bigger than the hallway, bigger than the school, bigger than the boys waiting for him by his locker with their cruel smiles ready. The lead bully Derek smirked the moment he saw him. "Look who showed up," he said, stepping forward like a king waiting to be bowed to. "You ready for your morning beating?" His friends laughed, one cracking his knuckles, another blocking the exit again. But Callel didn't back up this time. He didn't look at the floor or press into the lockers like a trapped animal. Instead, he took one slow breath and said, in the calmest voice they had ever heard, "Move." The laughter stopped cold, snapping off like a light switch. Derek blinked, confused for the first time. "What did you say?" Callel kept his gaze steady, his jaw tight, but his voice soft as rain. "I said, move." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was a line being drawn, a line that had lived inside him for years, but never reached the surface until this exact second. Derek stepped closer, inches from Callel's face, rage simmering in his eyes. "Or what? You gonna cry again? You gonna run to mommy?" Callel didn't flinch. Instead, he opened his backpack slowly and pulled out a thin folder, old, worn, edges torn. Derek snorted. "What's that?" "Your report card." But Callel didn't answer him. He just held the folder to his chest like it carried every piece of the life nobody knew he lived. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked not with fear, but with emotion he had swallowed for too long. This was my father's. Something shifted. Derek's smirk faded just slightly. His friends exchanged confused looks. Callel continued, louder now. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He saved a life. A kid. Someone your age. His voice trembled, and he died doing it. For the first time since the bullying began, the hallway went silent, not because people didn't care, but because they finally did. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say a single cruel word, the principal's voice boomed from behind them. All of you, in my office. Now, nobody knew it yet, but this moment would change everything. The principal's office felt colder than the hallway, colder than winter, colder than the world that had pushed Callel into silence for so long. He sat in a small chair across from the principal's desk, his hands folded tightly in his lap, that worn folder resting on his knees like it held the last piece of his father he still had. Derek and his friends were lined up against the wall, arms crossed, anger hiding the first hints of fear in their eyes. The principal, a tall white man with sharp glasses and a voice that usually sounded tired, looked strangely alert today, as if he had finally opened his eyes to something he should have seen long ago. Callel, he said gently, tell me what happened. But Callel's voice wouldn't come out. His throat was tight, his chest heavy, as if speaking the truth out loud would make his father's memory crumble in his hands. Derek scoffed. Come on, he's acting like the victim again. But before the principal could speak, Callel stood up slowly, gripping the folder so tightly the edges dug into his palms. You don't know anything, he said, his voice soft but strong, layered with years of swallowed pain. You don't know what I carry every day. He opened the folder with trembling fingers, revealing a faded newspaper clipping, a hospital report, and a medal half hanging from a torn ribbon. Derek's smirk died instantly. The principal leaned forward, eyes widening. Callel continued, each word heavy like a stone dropped into still water. My dad didn't make it past 30. He saved a boy who was being robbed, pushed him out of the way. Took the hit instead. His voice cracked. That boy lived. My father didn't. Silence swallowed the room. Even Derek looked down, his jaw clenching as if he didn't know where to put his eyes. Callel wiped a tear with the back of his hand. You think I'm weak because I don't fight back. But every day I wake up missing someone who never got to see me grow up. Every day I walk in here alone. Every day I try. The principal exhaled slowly, burying his face in his hands for a moment, before looking up with unexpected anger not at Callel, but at the boys who had been tormenting him. You boys, he said sharply, are in more trouble than you understand. But even he didn't know how big this was about to become, because someone else was listening outside the door. Standing just outside the office door was someone none of them expected. Officer Raymond Hale, the school resource officer, a tall white man with years of training in reading fear, lies, and truth written on young faces like ink. He had paused on his morning round when he heard snippets of Callel's trembling voice through the half-open door. Something in the boy's tone, raw, stripped, honest, made him stop walking and lean closer, the way a man does when he recognizes pain he's seen before. When the principal finally opened the door to call for him, Officer Hale stepped inside slowly, his eyes landing first on the torn folder in Callel's shaking hands, then on the metal glinting faintly under the office light. The room felt smaller the moment he entered, as if truth were finally filling all the empty spaces. What's going on here? He asked, but his voice was softer than usual. The principal explained everything, what happened in the hallway, what Derek and his friends had done for months, and what Callel had finally revealed about his father. Officer Hale didn't look at the bullies first. He walked straight over to Callel, lowered himself so they were eye to eye, and asked, Son, may I see that medal? Callel hesitated, then slowly handed it over. The officer turned the medal gently in his hand, reading the engraved name. When he read it, his eyes flickered with shock, not small shock, but the kind that freezes a man's lungs for a second. He whispered the name again under his breath, as if tasting a memory he never expected to return. Isaac Turner. No, it can't be. He looked up, his voice unsteady. Callel, your father was Isaac Turner. Callel nodded, confused by the officer's reaction. Derek and his friends exchanged uneasy glances. The principal leaned forward. You knew him. Officer Hale swallowed hard. More than knew him. He saved my partner's life. And he saved mine. The room went still, so still that even the clock on the wall seemed to forget to tick. Derek's friend stiffened. Derek's face drained of color. Callel blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Officer Hale continued, emotion breaking through the edges of his voice. Your father pushed us out of the way when the shooter fired. We lived because of him. We never found the boy he protected that day. We didn't even know he survived. He looked straight into Callel's eyes, his own brimming now. And all this time, his son was walking these halls alone, being torn apart by boys who didn't know they were insulting the child of a hero. Derek opened his mouth to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but the officer raised a hand sharply, and then he said the words that would change everything for every person in that room. I'm calling the district. This doesn't end in detention. This goes all the way up. The air in the principal's office grew heavier, as if the walls themselves were trying to lean in and listen to what would happen next. Officer Hale didn't waste a second. He pulled out his radio and requested immediate contact with the district superintendent. Derek and his friends stiffened, the reality of what they had done finally sinking into their skin like ice water. Callel stood frozen, not knowing whether to feel fear, relief, or the strange trembling hope rising inside him like something waking up after years of sleeping. When the superintendent arrived, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, she stepped into the room with the authority of someone who wasn't interested in excuses. What is the situation? She demanded. Officer Hale handed her the medal and the faded newspaper clipping. This boy, he said, voice low and firm, is the son of a man who died saving two officers and a child. His father was declared a local hero, but no one knew who the child was until his son walked into school today with his father's file. She scanned the medal, her eyes widening as recognition struck. Isaac Turner ... double quotes, she whispered. I remember this case. We thought the boy he saved never made it. Callel lifted his head slowly, his voice shaking with a strange fragile courage. He did, he whispered. I'm right here. The superintendent closed her eyes for a moment, swallowing hard, then turned to Derek and his friends. Do you boys have any idea who you've been tormenting? Derek tried to speak, his voice weak. We didn't know. We didn't know anything about him. Her gaze sharpened. You didn't need to know his background to treat him with basic decency. The boys shrank back against the wall. The superintendent placed the medal back in Callel's hands with unexpected gentleness, her voice lowering. Your father was a brave man, Callel, and you, walking in here today carrying his memory with this kind of strength. You are braver than you know. Tears filled Callel's eyes, slipping down his cheeks before he could stop them. For once, he didn't hide them. For once, no one mocked him, but just when the room seemed to soften, just when Callel thought the worst was over, the superintendent looked at the principal and asked a single question that made everyone sit up straighter. Were there any reports filed about this bullying? The principal's silence was the answer. She turned back slowly, her voice ice cold. Then this is not just about the boys. This is about the adults who failed him. And suddenly the room wasn't just about justice for Callel. It was about everyone who had allowed his pain to grow. The auditorium filled slowly, buzzing with the kind of quiet tension that settles into a room when people know they're about to face something bigger than rules and bigger than school. Teachers whispered nervously in the corners. Parents sat stiffly in folding chairs. And Derek's mother hovered near the front with a face full of dread, her hands shaking as if she already knew something was coming that she couldn't protect her son from. Callel stood backstage with Officer Hale beside him, the medal resting in his palm, its weight feeling different now, no longer a reminder of what he lost, but a symbol of what he was finally reclaiming. When the superintendent stepped up to the microphone, the room fell completely silent. She didn't waste time with warm greetings or school pride speeches. Her voice echoed through the space like a blade. We are here today, she said, because a student carried unbearable pain in silence while the adults responsible for his safety turned away. Several teachers shifted uncomfortably. Derek stared at the floor. His friend stood beside him, pale and shaking. She continued, This is not just a bullying case. This is a moral failure from students and staff. Callel felt his heart pounding as she called his name. Callel Turner, please come forward. He stepped onto the stage slowly, every eye on him. He had never felt smaller. He had never felt stronger. The superintendent nodded at him. Would you like to speak? His voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with each word. I didn't want trouble, he said softly. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to stop hurting. He held up the medal. This feels heavy because every day I tried to be strong like my father, but I didn't know how when the world kept pushing me down. The room shifted, breaths catching. One teacher wiped tears. Even Derek looked up, shame flooding his eyes. You don't have to know who someone is, Callel continued, to treat them with kindness. You don't have to know their pain to not add to it. He turned toward the bullies, not with hatred, but with something far harder to face: truth. You didn't just hurt me, you made me believe I deserved it. Derek's face crumpled, his chest heaving as if a weight finally collapsed inside him. The superintendent placed a hand on Callel's shoulder and turned to the room. Today, she said firmly, we correct what should have never been broken. And then she announced consequences that would shake the entire school. The room felt like it had stopped breathing as the superintendent stepped forward again. Her voice calm, but sharp enough to cut through every layer of silence in the auditorium. Effective immediately, she announced, the students responsible for harming Callel will face suspension, mandated counseling, and community restorative work. But this isn't only about them. Her eyes swept across the teachers, those who looked away in hallways, those who pretended not to hear, those who chose silence over responsibility. Every adult who ignored signs of bullying will undergo retraining, and every report from now on will be handled with full transparency. This school will not fail another child like this. A hush fell so deep you could hear someone exhale 3 rows back. Callel stared at the floor, overwhelmed, unsure whether he was dreaming or witnessing the world finally taking his pain seriously for the first time in his life. Then something unexpected happened. Derek stood, not with the arrogance he once wore like a crown, not with the swagger of a boy who believed he controlled fear, but with a trembling honesty he had never shown before. He took a shaky step forward, his eyes locked on Callel, his voice cracking the moment he spoke. I'm sorry, he whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I didn't know what you were carrying. I didn't know who your father was. But that's not the point. I didn't need to know. I was cruel because it made me feel bigger. And now I see how small it actually made me. His friends followed, offering awkward, broken apologies that felt like pieces of a shattered mirror finally being gathered. Callel listened quietly, not forgiving instantly, not forgetting years of pain, but letting the weight of their words land where they needed to land. He nodded once, not to excuse them, but to free himself from carrying their cruelty any longer. When the assembly ended, Officer Hale walked Callel out into the sunlight, the warm air brushing his face like a gentle hand. Your father, the officer said softly, would be proud of you not for being strong by fighting back with fists, but for being strong by standing up today. Callel closed his fingers around the metal, feeling its warmth sink into his skin. Maybe, he whispered, maybe today I finally made him proud, and for the first time in years. The ache in his chest eased, replaced with something new, something light, something brave, something whole. He walked home not as the boy who had been broken, but as the boy who chose to rise. And in the quiet wind behind him, it felt like someone was walking with him, someone he had carried all along. Moral of the story: you never know the pain someone carries. Choose kindness, because even the smallest cruelty can break a soul, but one moment of courage can rebuild a life.